The third part of collaboration is workflow management. When we talk about workflow, we're talking about the flow of work as it goes from one task and one person to another task and another person, and so on until the activity that we're performing as a group is completed. So you can think about workflow in terms of players passing the ball to each other in maybe a basketball game. One person dribbles the ball for a bit, moves to a certain section on the court, passes the ball off to someone else who does their job, who passes the ball to someone else who finally shoots the basket and scores the point for the team. That's an example of a workflow. In defining the workflows that we perform in our day-to-day work or student environments is actually one of the less thought about part of collaboration that's performed by maybe a new team. Okay. But as we'll see, looking at what the workflow is and defining it ahead of time can actually be quite beneficial. And for example, if you have a group report that you have to produce, the group leader may make assignments and say the group leader may take a shot at drafting it and then send it to person A for review. And then person A adds some comments, makes some changes, sends it to person B, who will send it to person C, who will then send it back to the group leader. Okay. Now, what happens if person A doesn't complete their review? Then maybe person B or the group leader needs to start emailing person A saying, hey, I'm waiting for your changes, please get them done and send them to me. Okay. So that's what's called a sequential workflow. It flows from one person to another, and you can kind of coordinate and try to communicate effectively to get people to do their work on time. An alternative to a sequential workflow is what we call a parallel workflow, which means I'm going to send it out and everyone's going to do their job and send it back. And then the challenge is integrating it, as I've mentioned, with the content management part of this module. Okay. So, but those are kind of two options that we have. We have parallel workflows, everyone's working at the same time. Sequential workflows, people are working in turn. And there's other combinations of this. We can have a sequential and then something parallel and then sequential and something parallel. We can kind of go around, or it can go to one person back to the group leader who sends it out to the next person, and kind of that's another type of workflow. So there's different workflows that we can apply. The trick is they cost a lot of time and attention to kind of manage for one person to be kind of coordinating. Okay, did you do your job? Did you do your job? When are you going to complete this? When do I have to have it done by? And so on and so forth. So we're starting to see the emergence of tools that help with workflow management. Okay. And Microsoft Office Sharepoint helps with that. Okay, so the group leader can create a document and then can select from a number of workflow templates. And then if it's going to be a sequential workflow, what happens is then the system is in charge of sending the document out, and then it adds a task to person A's task list that says you have 5 days to complete this. And then person A is done, they submit it, it goes back to the SharePoint server, and then SharePoint sends it out to person B. And then it goes back and forth to C, then D, and it finishes. So that's one example. But SharePoint becomes a software that is enforcing this workflow. You may have a class online that you take, or in Blackboard or Canvas, that forces you to complete one module before beginning another. That's another example of a forced workflow or a system-supported workflow. Okay, so if we can use computer tools to help us, then it takes the burden off of the other group members to manage this coordination process. Okay, so and then the person can, the group leader can kind of check in and see where everything's at, but SharePoint keeps track of all of this. So that's an example of workflow support. We design the procedure that we want to follow, and then we put it in SharePoint, and SharePoint enforces it and keeps track of all of the necessary communications and keeping the document moving along its way.